Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited to have both Isaac and Chad returning and a brand new face. Tommy's joining us. Looking forward to getting into that with you very quickly. Now, while I am excited, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff so you get your emails in the morning whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section. We will engage them throughout the show. I am looking forward to this. Now, today's general topic is external proxies. Now, I have a little intro to this, but before I get to that, let's go around the table. We'll get 10 to 15 seconds. Give me a who are you, where you come from, and all that good stuff. Chad, I'm going to start with you. Go.
I got to mute myself. Yeah, Chad McLean out in Peoria, Arizona, United States, former Army veteran. That's me, nutshell. Been here before. Glad to be back.
Under 10 seconds. I like it. Brevity. Tommy,
Shaun,
what about yourself?
we're in a hurry.
My name is Tommy Aceto, originally from Michigan, live in Nashville now. I was a former SEAL medic, intelligence officer, breacher, and some other things. And now I'm a breakthrough therapies advocate for the Veteran Mental Health Leadership Coalition, and also recently the chief mental health veteran officer for Give to Give Foundation, which gives people into the Dr. Joe Dispenza work.
Outstanding. Isaac, how about yourself? What do you got?
Man, it's hard to follow up those two powerhouses, but my name is Isaac Miller. I'm a Marine Corps vet, and I live out in Kansas City, Missouri. So that is me in a nutshell. And I run a gym and focus a lot on helping trainers, especially veterans, transitioning out of the military into getting into the fitness space and using those skills that they've actually don't realize they have, but they do have when they were in the military, to use those and run their own businesses and run their own lives outside of the military. So that's me.
Absolutely awesome. Now I have a general kind of look at what an external proxy is. Now, this is something that Shaun and I have discussed previously, where we were discussing my own use of helping others as an external proxy to avoid dealing with my own stuff. So, but when I actually looked it up, the concept of using it, or the concept of external proxies in general in the context of mental health, is actually not a standard terminology for anything. So as we get into this, I'm going to give some examples and we'll kind of talk about what it's for. But the original sense of an external proxy actually refers to a server or service that acts as an intermediary between a client and a target. So that is the initial part of it. But some examples: mental health support groups, mental health professionals. We have online resources and apps. There's peer support programs. There is all of the stuff that, we're all kind of involved in trying to better the people around us. And so I'm going to go around the table here before we go any further on this. And what are your thoughts when talking about external proxies? Isaac, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it pretty good, Chance. It's using kind of a third-party resource to help facilitate a service for a different individual or organization. So, for example, I might work under a coaching kind of umbrella for an organization, but I myself am the individual coach doing the work for them. Or it could be, pushing someone to a third-party service to seek help, with your help actually pushing them out to that. So that's kind of how I see a external proxy.
Outstanding. Chad, what are you thinking?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for explaining that, because I'm a knuckle dragger, so I couldn't fully understand the external proxy thing, but I'm with you now. But yeah, I mean, us, being Mental Joe, that's kind of our niche, right? Like we kind of have this brand to talk about mental health and other modalities and therapies, and so we get veterans all the time that are reaching out to us. So we feel like we're right in that wheelhouse. I kind of feel we're a connector. So, I mean, this fits right in our wheelhouse. Like I said, we get 2 to 3 veterans a week that reach out to us wanting more information on different types of therapies and where they can go to get this stuff. So this is definitely right in the wheelhouse of what we do almost every single day.
Awesome. Tommy, first
Well,
thoughts?
well, first thought is, Chad, you're not alone. I'm also a knuckle dragger. I mean, look at these hands. But I can deliver babies, so don't let them fool you. I think a proxy to me is an intermediate that helps one find a means to the end. And that is so that I never heard of it called as a proxy, because I think in my mind proxy war. But the proxy is, essentially helping people get to where they need to go, whether that's mental health or any other area you want to talk about. But yeah, I like that word now. I mean, it's got a unique twist to it.
It does really. Shaun, what about your first thoughts?
Well, I think it's being categorized well by the guests. The next piece I'd like to bump into is the upside downside to external proxies.
Let's hit it then. So, Shaun, I think, has a vacuum running through his house right now, or through his property. But the upside downside to this is where you're utilizing the facilitation. Let's say you're utilizing that as a way to not deal with your own issues. And so for me, I will use myself as an example. When I was working with the Canadian Walk for Veterans, it was easier to help the person beside me than it was to deal with my own issues at the time, if that makes sense. So instead of dealing with my own depression, I was great to give advice to other people, right? I can talk about how to get out of depression or how to deal with it in the moment, but I wasn't dealing with my own. So I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are. How do we avoid that initial concept of like losing ourselves to constantly helping others before we actually engage ourselves? Tommy, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Well, that's a powerful thing. I would say we're great at avoiding. I mean, there's the reason why we get to these places in mental health is because we avoid or procrastinate on looking at the things that are keeping us down. So it's easy to point your finger or help somebody else. It gives you dopamine. It gives you affirmation. We want that. We all have the same kind of wiring, but you can't truly, I believe, you can help so much more people if you help yourself first.
Absolutely. Chad, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, just to bounce off that Ed there with Tommy, it's almost, we've all been on an airplane. It's, put on your mask first and then help others, right? And so I think kind of in the space where Tommy and I are at, sometimes we get so focused on helping others. Like right now, I've got a lot of buddies going through some like life altering stuff, right? Divorces, you name it, life altering stuff. And I'm trying to hold space for them. But what I'm forgetting is I'm forgetting my foundation and how to come back around, how I need to hold myself accountable on the daily to make sure that, I don't slip in my standards and moving forward with my mental health progress. So you can do that pretty easily. And I've done it this last 3 weeks. Like I said, have been pretty rough on me because I'm holding space for everybody but myself. So I think having those checks and balances and learning to check back in with yourself so you can hold yourself accountable is, it's got to be done on a daily.
Yeah, absolutely. Isaac, what are you thinking?
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I mean, I love both Tommy and Chad's answer, and so I want to take it in a different stance because I think being able to deflect, into helping others is something that we all do. But being in the fitness space, I often see people, they're especially veterans. They'll go into because it's what we do, right? Like we're on deployment. What do? We lift. Like that's all we really have spare time for outside of doing the mission is we go work out. So they get out of the military, they just go work out. And I hear like the gym is my therapy. The gym is my therapy. I don't need a therapist. I go to the gym. It's like that's great, but yet you're still cheating on your wife and you're still abusing your kids and you're still drinking alcohol. Like what therapy is it? you're doing something healthy, but you're supplementing the actual therapy that you need. You still need to go see a therapist, heal the trauma. You still need to do all these things. So by that, it becomes this negative external proxy that they're putting all of their health into, their healing into, because perceptually it's something positive, but they're not using it for the right means. They're actually using it for a nefarious mean of like distracting and deflecting. So I do agree with Chad and Tommy, but I wanted to take kind of a different spin, because oftentimes we still do things within our own wellness per se that we feel like blankets all of it, but in reality we're using it as this kind of external source of validation and not actually doing the internal stuff that needs work.
I like that, Shaun. I'm going to come to you. Did you got some thoughts on the initial point of it?
I do. I apologize for what was going on there. So I didn't catch the two fellas, but I'm in line with Isaac in the sense that external proxies can become a distraction to not have to do the work that you don't want to do. And so it's a tricky thing to not call it out, but to identify, excuse me, to identify that the external proxy that feels so good is the thing that's holding you back. And once you start explaining that to someone, it then becomes almost a branching point of whether they're going to ditch that to find something else to then externally proxy the healing journey, as it were. And so I have seen in the past where people conflict from thing to thing to thing in order to stay engaged in the thing, though they're not moving any further ahead. They're actually moving horizontally instead of vertically, as it were. And these kind of conversations maybe shed a little bit of light on it, but have you found ways or strategies that can shed a little bit more clarity on these kind of things?
Interesting question, Tommy. I'm coming to you. What do you think?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I believe the plan to heal trauma or mental health in general is reset, rebuild. There's a lot of ways to get the reset. There's a lot of ways to do the rebuild. It comes down to intention and repetition. And I believe I was a 2-time state wrestling champ in Michigan. I was a 4-year NCAA soccer player, and I was in the SEALs for 16 years. So I have a degree in kinesiology. Movement is medicine. Working out does, all the experts say the same thing. You can adjust your neurochemistry by exercising, but you can't make it your idol. There has to be a process where we have to be aware of, am I going to the gym so that these girls, I can look at the girls and they can look at me, or am I going to the gym? Am I finding solitude? Am I focused on my workouts? Those are a lot of questions that I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with, but the reality is it comes down to intention and repetition.
Absolutely. Chad, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I've always told you before, I feel like I'm very early on in the stages, from refining the gym and refining myself and refining the standards that I need to hold myself to. And, having gentlemen like Shaun and Tommy and Isaac and yourself and others who I follow on social media, those are kind of like my check-in groups, right? I see Tommy pushing on a runner. I see Shaun pushing on his bike, I'm like, okay, I got to get my butt off the couch and I got to get going. I got to stop being willy-nilly with myself. So those are kind of like my check-ins, right? I know when I'm down in the dumps, I can kind of go to something, look at it, go, okay, Shaun's 60 and this guy is splitting trees in half with his mountain bike, like, okay, I can get up and go on this run, so having that tribe, if you will, that's what helps me stay focused with the mission in hand.
Isaac, thoughts?
Yeah, I like, just to kind of take a stance on both Tommy and Chad's, is the reset and rebuild is a key thing there. And then with having someone who's either trained to facilitate or has been through it and walked that walk and is now a good mentor, that needs to be in place as well. And I'll take kind of like I was listening to a interview with a marriage counselor, and the marriage counselor was talking to this couple where there was infidelity. And the big thing is we just want things back to the way they were before. And the marriage counselor was like, that's not going to happen. You're never going to be back to the way you were before the infidelity. It's impossible. It's never going to happen. But if you accept that and reset your ground where you are right now, you can still repair, rebuild, and have a better marriage than you did before. But you have to understand and let go of the idea that it's going to be ever. And with us, like especially in the veteran community or first responder community, there's a lot of trauma that we go under. We can't ever just go back in time and be without that trauma. But if we can face it, if we can accept it, but we have to have someone who understands how to facilitate that. It's like, I'm sure Chad can give a lot of understanding. Like, there's one thing to take a psychedelic as a means of rehabilitation. When you're with someone who understands it and can facilitate it for rehabilitation, it's another thing to go into your bedroom, lock the door, and take it yourself, and then go on the worst trip of your life, and then it do nothing positive. So it's to be able to reset, rebuild, but also have that facilitator who can take you through that process, so you're not just spinning that wheel for no reason at all.
Chad, you got any thoughts on that? I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, more just nails on the head, right? I mean, again, I had to reset. Like I said, these last 3 weeks have been rough on me because I have faltered in my own ability to hold my standards because I'm trying to hold space for everybody else. So I allowed what we're talking about to completely affect me. So I had to stop. I had to pause. I had to reset and then say, okay, put the head down and go again, and forget about the BS essentially.
Yeah. Tom, anything to add?
No, you guys are spot on. It's I've been in this lane of helping guys, veterans, for 5 years, and we take so much data away from these, whether it's a clinic in Mexico or Peru, or the reality is you still have to feel when you get back from the reset. That's the integration word gets out there, and that is kind of similar to Proxy, is this integration work. It's all about feeling. We have to get better at feeling, because the reality is we did jobs that we weren't allowed to feel. We were a liability if we felt. And the military, let's just get one thing clear. The military programs you, and so now we're learning about these things called operator syndrome and other things, but we have to get men and women able to feel again. And that's both the high and the low.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, I like playing with words just to gain clarity on things sometimes. And I've heard the same two words now, reset, rebuild. So I'd like to add another one to that. Reset, rebuild, rediscovery, which I've never thought about before. But I think rediscovery is kind of a cool thing, and you can play it out in a bunch of different ways. But I think at a very fundamental level, if someone's resetting and rebuilding, that next piece is to rediscover what you've accomplished, rediscover who you are after a year, rediscover who you are after that treatment, rediscover who you are with your new friends, rediscover who you are when you're in the gym on day 10. Reset, rebuild, rediscover, I think is a pretty good way to take things.
I like that a lot. Before we get into that, though, I just want to quickly hit up this. Winterstorm says, good morning, afternoon, team. Good to see you, Winterstorm. If anybody watching does have any questions, by all means, put them up in the comment section. We can engage them directly. But let's go back to you, Tommy. What are you thinking on terms of reset, rediscover, or rebuild, and then rediscover? What do you think?
I love that, Shaun. One of the things that I've learned on this journey is that change is a necessity for growth. We're not going to be the same person. The marriage was never going to be what it used to be, because that's not life. That's not reality. Reality is we are supposed to change. We're supposed to grow. And the only way we can grow is if we let go. So this rediscovery is, we're tapping into the frontal motor cortex, where creativity is a necessity to grow. And that discovery, like, I don't know I'm going to be in in 5 years and 10 years. I hope to God, I'm going to be with my wife, and we will, because we have worth ethic, and we're going to do that. But the reality is we have to look at things from a psychological perspective and go, what happens if this gets taken away? What happens if this gets taken away? How am I going to respond? And we have to discover who we are as we're living, and I think that's a beautiful way to describe this: reset, rebuild, and rediscover.
It is fantastic. Chad, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the rediscover's point on, like Shaun normally is, right? He's always adding these little verbiages to make us think a little bit more. And rediscovery is spot on, and that's where I'm at. I'm rediscovering certain passions and fires and abilities that I knew I had. I just, because I was so numb for so long, I kind of put everything on the back burner. I didn't think I was worthy. I didn't think I had the potential to do these sort of things. So I'm now rediscovering my potential, and each time I meet maybe that mountain, I can kind of peek over and go, oh, there's another mountaintop. So now I have a different wherewithal to continue to rediscover myself on a daily, weekly, hourly basis, depending upon where I'm at.
Absolutely. Isaac, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they hit it pretty well. And I think, to bring this back to external proxies, once you can't really have in my personal opinion, I feel like it's not always healthy to have an external proxy before you've had the reset. You find the external proxy as a system during the rebuild, and the rediscovery happens within that. Because if you have that external proxy, that system that allows you to rebuild, that you're using to rebuild, but you're not rediscovering things within that, there's no journey, there's nowhere to grow. You're just going through those motions. You understand, this is the system I have to do, so I'm going to do it, but you're not actually taking away. It's that rediscovery. It's that, oh, there's new things about this that I'm doing, whether it's like, Shaun has gone through like 8,000 careers after he got out of the military, and he's done all these different things. But each time he was rediscovering something, either about that endeavor, like, taking on owning a coffee shop and being a roaster and like understanding all these things. It wasn't just discovering himself. He was discovering all these other things that had a nuance and complexity to it. And that allowed subconsciously internal growth and healing and a process past what he had gone through. And it was part of that, rebuild, and he was rediscovering even outside of himself. And you can't do that without the reset first, or else you're just going to hit that same problem. And each time you try and do a different kind of external proxy, like, this isn't working, do something else. Oh, this isn't working, do something else, this isn't working. So I think it's just, to bring it all around, you have to have that reset, but that rebuild needs to be paired with that rediscovery, and you have to be discovering new things within what your new endeavors are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Shaun, you got any additional points?
Yeah, another good way to look at it is through kind of those 3 C's that we kicked out there, or we kind of cobbled together a couple of months ago or whenever it was. And it is, first of all, you've got to have curiosity. And then you've got to apply some consistency. And then you've got to apply some contextuality. And so generally speaking, that's be curious in life, man. Like, if something catches your eye, bam, go check it out. Have some curiosity and be curious about it for longer than a second. That's the consistency aspect. If you see something that catches your eye, engage in it for a year. That is consistency. I mean, a week is, if you do it every day for a week, it's kind of consistency. For a month, now there's almost a pattern being formed. But over a year, now we have a pattern. Now you know who you are with that curiosity. And through a year's extension, you can look backwards and get better contextuality of who you were a year ago, and whether that curiosity journey is providing you the improvements or the benefits or the clearer worldview that you're seeking. And Isaac had said it, the idea being that we shouldn't just categorize our curiosity as just our own individual curiosities through our own ego view of who we are, we have to see a little bit more than just ourselves. We have to see maybe that laser focused, clean, direct path immediately in front of us. But you've got to pay attention to the 10% or 5% on either side of that laser trajectory that allows you to pick up the nuances that maybe you weren't trying to pay attention to, but they kind of bubble up on the left and right flanks, and that might catch your attention. And that's how the curiosity becomes a richer journey. So you can stay focused, but you've got to keep an eye on the flanks to enrich the journey, as it were.
That's an interesting point too, because now I want to. I have a thought on this, and I'm going to bring it back to something. So stick with me through this. Initially, Shaun, you had said something about ditching something to find something else, and so I wanted to kind of touch on this a little bit because I think it has to do with what we're talking about. Is that Isaac? You'd said at the beginning, when you're in the military and you're not doing something, you're usually working out, right? Like, so you just have that comfortability of like, well, I'm not doing this, so I'm gonna hit the gym. And to a point, I think, do you have to let it all go? Do you have to completely ditch it, or say, you know what, this proxy that I've created with the gym or with running whatever it is, right? Do you have to completely let that go, and then in order to move past it, or can you still kind of engage in it, but just either rediscover the curiosity of like, what else can I do? What do you guys think? Isaac, I'm gonna hit you first.
Yeah, no, I don't think you should ever like quit exercising. As Tommy said, like that is it does help. It is therapeutic, and it does have a way of helping you reconnect new neural pathways and help internal and external healing. So that's that. You don't want to give that away, but it's more so if you have internal problems that stem from trauma, from fear, from neglect, from abuse, like all these different things, and you haven't had the reset of like, I have been abused, or I have gone through trauma, I have lost my best friends, I have had people die in my arms. Like if you haven't actually sat down and processed that, then it might be that healthy external proxy is just a mask to distract you from the actual issues. And so no matter how much you go to the gym, you're always going to be stuck with this overarching anxiety or depression or other symptoms because the trauma hasn't actually been addressed so you can even heal it. You have to like open up the Band-Aid and let air in to have some healing happen. And though the gym is like that air that goes in and helps oxidize the wound, it does no good if you don't actually open yourself up to that. And so a lot of times when trauma happens, we just keep that closed in, and we'll do all these healthy things. And we can talk about philanthropy. A lot of people do a lot of stuff for other people. They'll work on other people. It's like that. It's like that business coach who can, help others, build an amazing business, but they're like thousands of dollars in debt and, living at their parents' house. It's like, that's great that you can help other people, but if you're not helping yourself, what good is it at the end of the day? If your family doesn't have food on the table, what good is it at the end of the day? And so that's, I guess, a way to go about it. But I would also say it is good, if myself included, I did bodybuilding for a long time, and I kind of just got used to that bodybuilding thing, and I found that it wasn't as therapeutic anymore. So it's like, maybe I should try something else in fitness. Maybe I should, start researching Olympic lifting, or start researching, powerlifting, or start getting back into jujitsu and Muay Thai, and get those curiosities, start putting those puzzles together again, and have that ignite a new fire so it is therapeutic again, because it gets to a point where it just gets stale and it's not therapeutic anymore. So you have to have that rediscovery and find new things for it to actually be therapeutic again. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Tommy, what are you thinking?
Well, I just wanted to say this in my head, kind of back to what Shaun said. If intelligence, or if awareness is the start of all intelligence, then creativity is the start of all genius. And the reason I say that is because as a former wrestler, and the mind is like, for me, it's like a wrestling match with the mind. If we get set on the dopamine that we receive from the patterns of our life. There needs to be a dopamine fast of some sort. So that change is not going to feel good. It's not going to feel good stepping away from something, even though we know we should. That's where something deeper inside you has to say, I'm going to lean into this unknown. I'm going to lean into it, and I'm going to just surrender to it, because that's the mind. This mind thing that we're tackling here is so deep. It's so profound. And at the same time, we want to, they say feelings are authentic. We should feel them. It's not always that case. Sometimes we have to look at the mind and go, whatever it's telling me to do, I'm going to do the opposite. And that's where it gets real, like a wrestling match.
Absolutely, 100%. I use jujitsu, but that's just because I'm a jujitsu guy. Chad, what are you thinking?
Man, I got nothing. I'm just sitting. I'll be honest. I'm brain dead right now. I'm just soaking it in, listening to it. Like, all right, we're making good points. I got this. I'm gonna cache this stuff for later down when I'm croaking on a run. So I got nothing, man. I'm enjoying it.
Awesome. Shaun, thoughts?
Yeah, I feel that way myself sometimes as well. I think that the curiosity aspect, by considering it as sort of a plus 5% on either side or plus 10% on either side, it's kind of a good little idea to latch on to, because when I look back at the various careers that I've done, I think about half of them are happenstance. I mean, it's not like I fell victim to my career. It just like the career assaulted me. What I'm saying is, like, there was a career in front of me tomorrow that I wasn't even aware of. But my curiosity led me down a path that ended up into a career. And so I think that our curiosity can take us directions, but then you've got to understand that you've got to enable your curiosity to execute against a thing that's starting to show up in front of you every day and starting to form the pattern that, oh, wow, I guess I'm now a coffee roaster. Oh, wow, I guess I'm now a ... And I think that that is part of the rediscovery aspect. We tell ourselves that we're something, but then we wake up one morning, we realize that we've been something else for quite a long time. But if you don't get right with that moment, then you're kind of half-assing it to some degree. And I think you should kind of go all in on things and not go all in blindly and carelessly and foolishly. But I think you got to, when you realize what's happening, you kind of got to get after it. You kind of got to own it. And so having the curiosity in life to kind of flow through it like water, but at the same time try to be a powerful waterfall while you're flowing, I think that's kind of a cool concept.
Interesting. To that point, I'm wondering now, this is my own personal thought on this, but do you think that perhaps maybe the issue with most veterans in general, or the veterans that are struggling, let's say, is that they're proxying their present for the past, for what they were? They're proxying now, if that makes sense. Chad, I'm going to come to you first. What are you thinking?
I mean, for me, I think one of my biggest sticking points is it wasn't what I became, right? I had this thought process of what I was going to do with my military career, and it didn't pan out at all. In fact, it was the complete opposite, right? I ended up getting kicked out of Ranger Battalion, as opposed to, excelling the ladder up. So for me, I held on to this belief that, I wasn't worth anything. I was going to continue to be a failure my whole life. I didn't have the really crazy cool combat experience that some veterans have. And so I really didn't talk about any kind of veteran thing that I ever did, because I was embarrassed about my service, right? One, because I didn't have the full combat that a lot of guys have. And I got kicked out of a unit where I was really good. I was going into sniper section. I had things lined up, but burning in on a jump, and before you know it, getting addicted to pain pills and playing the woe is me game. That's what held me back for 20 plus years. So it wasn't the service that I had. It was, in my mind, it was my lack of service is what really hindered me.
Interesting. Tommy, what are you thinking?
This is my sweet spot right here. It's identity. The programming we get from identity is I think it's the fundamental problem. I come from a background, but all my grandpas, my father's dad, my mother's father, and my stepfather's father, they were all in the Navy. And my dad's dad was the champion of the Pacific Fleet for boxing back when boxing was a big deal in the Navy in World War I or II. Fast forward, he was also in the mafia, and he was he was all kinds of crazy stuff. My dad didn't receive any kind of good fraternal, healthy, emotional education. And because of that, my whole life, I'm the middle child going, look at me, look at me. And that's when my quest for identity started as a kid. And it was go win, go get good grades, go make people like you, because it feels safe. And the nervous system is divided into fear or survival mode and feeling safe. And so if you spend a lot of your time surviving, it's what happens. It's what we're seeing. But bringing it back to identity, I say the code that writes the nervous system is the I am. Fill in the blank after that. And what we're seeing is that the hardest thing for most veterans to do is to let go of their identity, to the badges, to the accolades. And it's not just veterans. This is human beings, in my opinion. And so to rediscover your new identity is to accept that, if you break it all down, it's just to be. It's simply just to be and to discover the things you're going to grow into. And that takes a lot of of practice and failure and going, oh man, that road wasn't a good road. So it's just having grace for yourself and learning that if you really want to make change, you have to change this concept of the identity.
Absolutely. Isaac, thoughts?
I mean, kind of like Chad before, I'm just kind of soaking it all in. It's great. I have thoughts on the identity piece, but could you remind me kind of the original question, because my brain has gone on all kinds of now different side quests.
This is why I take notes all the time. But the original question was, do you think that perhaps as veterans, or that most veterans are proxying their present for their past?
Yeah. So that, I mean, they both hit it really well. And I have a story that resonates with Chad, because what I went into the military doing was not what I ended up doing. And there was an identity that I had, at the start of that kind of carried me into the second part of my career that was actually causing me to be toxic, because it wasn't the right place to have that identity. And then when I got out of the military, I had, a different identity. And I had a mentor who, he was really good out, like just recently, I've had a mentor in business that's told me, like, it's like wearing a hat. And sometimes if you have like your soldier, warrior hat on, you're always going to be looking for a war to fight, and there isn't one. You end up making your own battlefield, and it can be toxic for the mission that you're actually doing right now. You have to be able to switch that. Like, there were times, I'm sure, in overseas, in the dirt, where Tommy had to take off his warrior hat and put on his medic hat. Like, whenever he's dealing with locals, he can't be screaming at a pregnant woman the way he would in certain situations. He has to be able to switch that identity in that moment. And so for me, working with like veterans who are wanting to get into having their own business, or going out and actually being productive in the marketplace, it's being able to help them switch that hat and be able to still bring the skill sets over that are good, that they need, but to leave behind those things that are going to hold them back when they switch that identity. And the one thing that I would like to ask, the panel that might, benefit me personally is, what do you guys do? What practices do you have to be able to help you take ownership of the new identity that you're trying to bring on and leave behind kind of the old identity without losing what the old identity did for you? Um, because, like, once a Marine, always a Marine. Like, that's an identity that I'll still always kind of carry that title with pride, but I'm not that anymore. Having the Trident is something that, Tommy will always have, but that doesn't define him anymore. The Pathfinder across Shaun's chest is something that it helped make him who he is, but it's not him. Like, he's not still there, doing that job. So what do you guys do, if you don't mind me asking, to kind of help you get into that framework of a new identity?
Well, first off, I'm the one that asked the questions. No, I'm just kidding. Shaun, what do you think? I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I think it's an extremely relevant topic at hand right now, because we have talked about this to some degree in the past, and I forget how many months ago I started chirping about it. Was really kind of getting under my skin how, I don't want to say veterans, but everyone it got all hung up on titles. Now, I don't mind if someone's got a title. I don't mind that at all. But it doesn't define you. But more correctly, it doesn't define you if you were that title 20 years ago and you've never been it since. And so I have some titles, but I've tried to live my life with those titles within me and tried to represent them internally and externally, not like getting up in someone's grill and say, did you know I was a ... But I just live my life as part of the embedded journey that is within me. And it's hard to take the Pathfinder out of me. It's hard to take the ... out of me, because it's like almost in my DNA. But I recognize that. And so it's my job to manage that and manage it in a way internally and externally. So I'm not out there bugging anyone else about chirping how I used to be a Pathfinder, because I'm not. But I am, but I'm not. And that's the devil in the details, is understanding who you are and when you're supposed to be it. And so I'll kind of try to explain it this way. When I got out of the teams, or out of Tier 1 Special Operations, so I'm a JTF2 sniper that's not able to explain to anyone anything that I did. And so that creates a lot of turmoil. Because when I got out of that, it was a very, very real and very present in the real time identity. I hadn't been able to get enough time to separate myself from that. So I think that, as we'll say now, veterans, I think there's a timeline there that is required. You can't bounce out of the teams and then the next day you're just like amazingly got your act together and you've figured out all of this titles and identity stuff. It takes time. How long? Well, it took me a long time, because you know what I didn't have? I didn't have a thing like this, where I could bounce ideas off of guys or other veterans or other people who understand what we're talking about, all of the freaky little tabs that ran down our sleeves in the game that we were in. And so I think it takes time. And the timeline is predicated on, if you're just doing all the work by yourself, bumbling around the world trying to figure it out in the chaos, or if you've got people aligned next to you on your left and right who can kind of shape your trajectory to some degree, because they've been through it themselves, like us. We have been through a trajectory, started to figure out titles, started to figure out the broader world wrapped around us and how to play well in that larger construct. I'm still trying to figure it out. Even as I explain it to others how they can do it better, I'm still trying to do it better myself. So it isn't an on-off switch where you get out of a velocity unit and then 3 days later you flick a switch because you had all the right people around you and you go from 0% to 100% with the switch flick. It just doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. It's it's like a sliding scale of improvement that doesn't work on a linear velocity. Sometimes it's jiggity jaggedy, and sometimes it goes backwards a little bit, depending on the path that you are on. And so if you have the curiosity to listen to this panel right now, and you have some curiosity in life, and don't be so dogmatic about how you used to be a thing 20 years ago, free your mind, you'll find out that you're not the person that you were. You're the person that you are now. So now I'm going to give my pro tip for the day on how to do this better. We were laughing about it yesterday on the podcast in the green room. So that's an area that no one gets to listen to, just the panel. And I believe it was Ryan on the show yesterday. We were laughing about how easy it is to do all of this if you just freaking just do you. Like, not overthink all of this stuff, not try to pretend that you've got all the answers, not try to be funny when you're not funny. Just hang out, be cool, be you. You don't have to create an artificial veneer on top of yourself to have people like you, have people understand what you're trying to say. You've just got to do your thing. Just let it rip. And if you do it with the right intentions, if you're a righteous trajectory, it'll unfold as it should. And you can look back in time, 1 year, 2 year, 10 years, and give yourself a nod for just freaking flicking the switch of do you, bro. That's my pro tip.
That's wonderful.
Bam. Like mic drops. This one.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah, everybody, let's shut it down. There we go.
That's it. Just here to
Well,
listen.
you know what, Chad? I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
No, I can't follow Shaun like that. Come on. This guy just hit a grand slam in the World Series, and you're telling me to come on up and talk for a little bit.
I
mean, it's like, it is. It's nail on head. And for me, again, I always say, again, it's new to me, right? Because I'm new to the apparel world, and I'm new to this switch, right? Prior to that, I was 20 years in corporate real estate. I lived the life of numb and getting in the car and commuting and hating it every single minute, but I had to give a paycheck, and I was scared to step outside the box because I didn't think I was worth anything, right? So it's real cool for me now to look back and see where I was 2 years ago and see where I'm at today, and sharing a panel with gentlemen like you with others that are curious about what I'm trying to do with apparel and so forth. So it's really kind of cool from what Shaun said there. I can look back and I literally can see the tracks coming from 2 years ago to where I'm at now. So I reflect on that as much as I can, because I know where I was 3.5 years ago and where I'm at today.
You know what I just realized is that technically Shaun's in the future, so he probably watched this already, knew what we were going to be talking about, and like preset it so that he was good to go.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me one bit. Not
Right?
one bit.
Right?
Yeah.
Tommy, what are you thinking?
Oh man, I what comes to mind is a couple of things. One, I'm finishing my master's for writing. Storytelling is one of the most powerful tools we can use in society. We're seeing that play out, and also in our healing journey, the story we tell ourselves, the story we leave behind, it's the only thing we got. And the reality is, I love Forrest Gump. I always say when I meet somebody, I say, you know, that feather in the beginning of the movie, that's me. And a couple of years ago, I actually was in Wendy Feinerman, who was the producer for Forrest Gump, rescued that movie for 9 years and got an Oscar for it. So I ended up meeting her and sitting next to her in a Yankees game, talking to her about the archetype of Forrest Gump, the paper that I just wrote a couple weeks before that in my class. And one of my best friends, let me switch gears. One of my best friends is Mike Sweeney from the Kansas City Royals. He told me about 10 years ago that I asked him, what was your key to your success? He is a retired Hall of Famer from the Royals and just a divine, beautiful man that can show his emotions. And he's a big old dude. He said, I didn't find success until I took my hands off the wheel. And he gave me this little sticker that I always carry around. It's a tandem bike. And he said, you know, I was about to get cut my first year in the major leagues, and I had 0% chance of making a team. And he went and prayed, and he said that God told him that if he just gets on the back seat and pedals his ass off, he'll be okay. And I thought, that's a real hard concept to accept when you're a control freak and you're trying to, survive all these things. And I started doing that, and I try to live that way to this day, to take my hands off the wheel and just to train my ass off in terms of whether it's learning guitar or working out or doing breath holds underwater with people like Laird Hamilton. And, it's just the ability to let go is a skill set in itself. And there's so much that goes into letting go that we could sit here and talk about it for a couple of days, but I don't have time.
Next time. Isaac, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm thinking that they all answered my questions, so I can hand the show back to you, Chance. No, it was really well said. There's nothing I can really add to that. So
Awesome. Well, I have one final question. It'll probably take us to the end of our time here, but I'm wondering.
Sorry, buddy.
You got something,
I just
Shaun?
have to add a little bolt-on piece here, because Tommy had said that he was mentioning the power of storytelling, and I think, did I mention it yesterday or that? No, it was in my live IG chat yesterday. I was just walking around Whereversville at the race course, etc. And anyway, I mentioned Tim Turner's wife and how she'd encouraged me to, because I was ready to quit all of this nonsense. I didn't even know what I was doing in front of the microphone. The whole thing was freaking irritating me, and I was ready to bounce. And she just said, keep on going, Shaun. You're a storyteller, you're a natural storyteller, and why don't you just tell stories? Why don't you just talk to people like you talk to everyone, but just do it in front of the microphone? I said, what? Is that all it takes? And she said, yeah, just give it a try. So that's what I started trying to do, and that's what I try to do now. And it's not like I'm telling a story now. I'm just trying to let it unfold. I don't know what my next word will be. I just let it happen, and I trust that it's going to unfold. And so I think that's part of life, man. You gotta do your best. That's for sure. Which means you gotta work hard. You gotta pay a little bit of a price. You gotta struggle. You gotta commit. And all of these things that kind of hold people back, the cost of moving forward, you've just got to get right with paying the price to move forward. But that price is for you to control. I mean, you can throw $1 million down on the table of your personal energy or your life or your however you want to categorize it, or you can throw down $1. It's for you to determine the velocity of how you let this thing unfold. It's for you to determine on how much you commit or not. But the only way to move forward is to choose to commit. But then it's for you to choose the incrementality of the commit. So you don't have to go 1,000,000 miles an hour on day one. You can go 1 mile an hour. And along the way, maybe, as Tommy said, if you let go of the wheel at 1 mile an hour, you'll watch the car creep down the road safely. It's not going to roll into the ditch in a second because you're not going fast enough yet. But if you take your wheels or your hands off the wheel at 10 miles an hour, if you've been doing it for 1 mile an hour, it's going to feel like 1 mile an hour if you've been doing it for a few days. I know I've driven vehicles at high speed with my hands off the wheels, shooting out of a window and talking on a radio. It's no big deal if you've been doing it for a long time. And I know the first time my wife jacked me up for steering the car with my knees while I was doing a few things, I know it's a handful, man. It's not for everyone, and I don't recommend it to anyone unless you've been in the game a long time. Now, yeah, she corrected me, and I put my hands on the wheel, and she's right, I'm wrong. But from my perspective, I'm safe in that moment, and safety is key to this conversation, as Tommy said. If you don't feel safe, now you're operating in a different fear status. And fear is what cripples us. So you've got to set a stage where incrementally you build your skill sets, your sense of self-belief, your self-worth, your validation of who you are in the moment, so that you can kind of own who you are. But it takes time. It doesn't happen in a day. And so the really powerful part of that is if you can do it long enough, if you can tell your own story to yourself long enough and see the beauty of the journey that you're creating within yourself and your life's story, as it were, then you get to tell your story to other people. And the devil in that detail is whether you tell the story well or not, because all of us have got amazing stories. But if you're a goof who can't put words together, then the story sucks and all that power is lost. And so our job is to live a good story, but also learn how to tell our good story, I think.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. You got something, Tommy?
Yeah, just the awareness of non-duality. And non-duality is this beautiful concept. It's like a stretching of the mind. It's a both and. It's not an either or. And I think that's a nervous system or a programming thing that most people are running a binary system, and something that psychedelics and also holotropic breath work and all these resets like cold baths and all this can help with this new program in this new concept. It's not new, it's non-duality. It's an energy thing. So if I'm like trying to get that job or that girl or get this thing and I'm pushing at it, sometimes in life you're just pushing it away. But if you bring that energy and you focus inward and you let go of all those external expectations, guess what happens? Most time it comes at you. And it's just, I'm so aware of that concept now that I live by it, and it's not easy, but the more aware I am, I say, oh, this is the way. It's going inward, and everything else will take care of itself if you trust. And that's the power of belief. That's the medicine that we're selling right now. To inspire somebody is to put spirit into. Spirit is another word for energy. You're changing their energy. We're changing people's energy right now by the words that we're saying, by the story that we're telling. And Shaun, the last thing I would say is those that allow for the universe or whatever word you want to put in there to write your story, those are the best stories. They're the best because they're not fabricated. They're authentic, and they inspire the hell out of people.
100%. I have this little thought, and Shaun, I wanted to point this out to you that through this conversation, I have finally come to a fruitful discussion in my own head on what grace, not slack, means. I know you asked me this a long time ago, and I had this whole thing. So for you guys to understand, I had this saying that I would use: grace, not slack, grace, not slack. And I finally realized that what it is that grace is it's a post-activity thing. It's after action, right? So you've done something, it didn't go the way you want to. Okay, give yourself grace. Like, you did something, it didn't work out. Cool. Slack is a preemptive system. So I'm going to go for, not today. That's slack. And so, to your point, Shaun, through this conversation, that's allowed me to really fine tune that to what it is. And the point that I wanted to make just a second ago was basically what you guys were getting at, was that, Shaun, earlier you had said, your velocity is on a sliding scale, or you use the rotary dial a lot, but it's really the velocity of the day, right? That's the thing I think that a lot of people don't understand. I didn't understand it for a long time, is that I always expected, like, if I want to do something, I'm going to chase it. I'm going to go after it. I'm going to, like, all in velocity all day, every day for as long as I could muster. And then I would run out of gas. Versus, what velocity am I going to pick today? Right now, in this moment, do I need to be all in, or do I need to be all in with my kids? Right? Okay, well, my kids, slider goes up. Boom. I'm hanging out with my kids. Everything else comes down because of that. But if I'm picturing like one of those big production boards in a music studio, right? Where you move one and all the other sliders start to shift on their own. And that's, I think, what we're talking about in terms of, especially proxies too, is that each one of those little things is a proxy for your own health in every different little thing. So your kids, your work, your own identity, your physicality, your whatever, one moves, the rest shift. And you find eventually you get to a point where you can start to play with those ahead of time. So
Mm.
I really wanted to say, first off, thank you guys for the conversation. It has been fantastic. Isaac, Chad, Tommy, I can't wait to have another one. I'm going to set you guys up for another, just the three of you guys, because that was fun. Let's get some final thoughts on anything that we've gone over so far. Isaac, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, just final thought, like grace, not slack. It's not just giving yourself grace after you do something and it doesn't work the way you want it to go. It can be also after you do something that you recognize was purposely toxic for yourself. If you find yourself going after an external proxy for the simple sake of masking it, give yourself grace and forgive yourself for doing the thing that you knew was wrong for yourself. Sometimes we do things wrong and we don't forgive ourselves. We beat ourselves up and then just move on, but then we repeat it again. But if you can forgive yourself for it, it's easier for your brain to register that there's healing after that, and you won't repeat the behavior. So you brought that up, and it was a beautiful statement, Chance. So I wanted to expand.
Absolutely. You're totally right. Chad, final thoughts?
I got nothing. Dr. Phil probably should polish up his resume with you guys talking here. I mean, you guys are going after some jobs. I think it's been a great panel, great day. I'm just so I appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Tommy, final thoughts?
More than honored just to be a part of this conversation. And I would say you got to feel to heal. You got to change your energy to change your reality.
Bam. I like it. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yeah, it was a great conversation, fellas. I really appreciate everything that y'all brought and got me thinking about a few things. And I think that's what we're supposed to do every day is through active curiosity, listening to other people's perspectives, but more importantly, not just listening, like trying to gain something from it.
Yeah.
Trying to win in the moment, trying to focus on how can I take more awesomeness out of this conversation so that I can be more awesome for those around me. That's kind of what I try to do here every day. Chance and I laugh about it from time to time. We said it way more often when we kicked this thing off at the start of the year. However, what were we, 310, 320 podcasts ago? I don't even know. Who knows? But back then, we were doing firmware upgrades in our brains. We were doing firmware upgrades in our communication style. We were doing firmware upgrades in our ability to listen, hold our space, get better. I'm so grateful for these kind of conversations because they make me better every single day. So fellas, thanks for that.
Yeah, 100%. We are day 307 today, which is crazy. Who would have thought at the beginning of the year that we would be here in this moment doing these types of conversations? I really, again, fantastic chat. Hope to have you guys on again. The only thing I want to end on really here is learn what your control board looks like, right? If you're only looking at one dial, you're missing everything else. So learn what's on your control board, build upon that knowledge, and grow to utilize it to your best ability every day. And you can do that with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.